false and anything is false. And does that make sense? So true and false is false, but true or false is always true. Okay? Now, what is new about this line of code is this little thing, exclamation point before equal. So this is called a not operator. Not always negates the value of the Boolean expression. In the case of having an equal after it, it basically stands for not equals. So in fact, 2 plus 1 not equals 4 is, that's right, it's true, because 3 is not equal to 4. Basically, it's the opposite of saying equals, right? Also, you can put and not, this exclamation point, before a Boolean value. So like this, not true is false, and not false is true. Or you can say not 1 equals 2 is true, because it becomes not false. Okay? So far so good. Now I want to introduce you a new type, and that is called a null type, sometimes called a void type. And it's designated by this empty parentheses. There's actually a value, so if I just print it, it doesn't do anything. It's nothing. It represents nothing, or a void. Now what is that all about? What is it useful to have nothing? Oh, very useful. Let's take a look at this function that I have here, which is called say hi. Okay. Now, say hi, we're defining a function, so far so good, but the inputs that we're asking is nothing. There's nothing inside those parentheses. And the output type after that arrow is also nothing. What is that saying to you? What that is saying is that this function doesn't take any input. It's like a juicer that says, I don't want to take any produce. And then its result, which is that thing on the right of the arrow, is also nothing. What is that about? And this function doesn't do anything? Well, it actually does something. As you see, it prints hi. So if I define this function and then I call it like this, you call it without giving any inputs because it doesn't take any input, but you still have to put the empty parentheses after the name of the function. So if I run this, it indeed print hi, like we told it in here. Now, why is the output? I understand how the input is empty, void type, but why is the output void? Didn't do anything? Well, the reason is that, as you see, there is nothing return here. There was no return some value here. So whatever after the return is the value that's returned. If there is nothing here after return, it's basically saying return, don't return anything, or you can omit that if there's nothing going to be after return, like we had it here. That's fine. That's equivalent. So the reason is what this print function is doing is actually not returning a value. What it's doing is what is called a side effect. So a side effect is something that a computation might do, which doesn't have to do with things that are inside the program itself. It might be something outside. So what's an example of a side effect? We've seen a lot of it so far. Is indeed printing to the screen. So as you see, the action of printing some value to the screen is something outside the program itself, right? So that's why it's called a side effect. But it's not a value that be returned by this function to anybody. So for example, can I say let a be equal print 10? Can I say that? Well, let's try it. No, that's an error, because saying print is a void type, doesn't have any output, so it doesn't produce a value that I can give then assign to A. You can just say print 10 because it does something, but it doesn't return something, so it doesn't produce a value that I can then assign to A. Therefore, this is an error, right? So printing is a side effect. What's other example of a side effect is, for example, sending an email. Let's say you have a program, when you run it, it sends an email to your friend, or writing to a cloud, or storing data on your computer disk. So all those things you see are outside of the realm of your own program, and they're side effects, they're not values. So if a function only does those kind of things, it has a void type or a null type. That makes sense? So that's why this function that we just defined doesn't have a output type, it's null type. Okay, now of course it doesn't have to have a null input. For example, let's say we want to have a function that takes a name which is of type not integer but string, right? And then just prints hi followed by that name. So what is this? If I call this function on Joe, what should it be printed? Now you guessed it, it's just gonna say hi Joe, right? Because we said take the name, and the name, because we call it with Joe, is going to be Joe, and he's going to concatenate because of this concatenation operation hi with space with Joe, and you get hi Joe. That makes sense? So in this case, the output's still nothing because this was just a side effect, printing, but the input was one string. And you can print something but still return a value. For example, let's say this function does print something but still maybe return a value, maybe always returned true. That's fine. Maybe in that case this the output type for this function wouldn't be null, would it? In this case would be bool. That's correct. And in that case we can indeed assign the value of calling this function to a variable, right? Because it does return a legitimate value, which is a bool. That makes sense? Okay. So that is all, and I'm just going to give you a homework that you can think of for next time, for next lecture. And the homework is asking you to write a function called isOdd, which takes a number and returns true if the number happens to be an odd, not even. So for example, if I print isOdd on a number, it says takes a number. So we don't necessarily have to give it a label. It's up to you whether you make it optional or required, but let's say we don't make it required. So if I just give it a number isOdd 9, what it should do, it should return true, right? But if I say isOdd 14, it should return false, or isOdd 0 should return false. Okay, so the homework is to find out how to define this function. Now, part of it to do this actually requires using an operator that we haven't talked about. So part of it is I want you to practice to go ahead and Google, search for what you need. So search for the thing that you're needing so you can practice finding the components that your software needs. So go ahead and search for how to do this job and write a function in Swift, right? We can get started with defining the function. If you remember, how do I define a function? Using the more common way. As we said, we start with the keyword func, and then you give it a name. Well, we ask to give it a name isOdd, right? So say isOdd, and then what follows? Then we give it the inputs and their types. So in this case, let's say it's a number, so let's just say n colon, and then the type of the input would be, that's right, not bool, but int. And then we said make it optional, so we can just put an underscore here. Is there more inputs? No, there's no more inputs. And then we need to give it, that's right, the output type. So we need that arrow symbol, and then the output type for this is it int? No, it's returns true or false, so therefore should be bool. That's right. And then we open the curly symbol and then we close it. So by convention, when you do open the curly, like starting in a block of code, what is called, you indent it. So usually indent four spaces. So when you do go inside define the function, what you do is usually go indent by 4 characters like this, and you start your function here. So in order to return a value, as usual, we say return, and then we put something here. So the question is what to put here so it returns the desired function, the desired computation. Okay? So that's it for today. Thank you for watching and listening, and I look forward to see you next week in the second class. If you have any questions, do send me an email. I'll be happy to answer any questions about programming. And again, if you want to try play with Swift at home, either you can just use the easy option of going to the website, the iswift.org/playground, or if you happen to want to get serious and get app programming, you can install in Xcode on your computer, and then rather than actually doing this in Xcode, once you have the Xcode, you should be able to open the terminal as I have done before and just type in Swift to be able to run it. Now, I think this Xcode is installed on Mac computers, but if you have a PC, if you have a Windows computer, you need a virtual Mac installed to be able to run Xcode, as far as I know. But there might be easier way. You can just Google how to run Swift on a Windows computer. And I think there is a library that you can run, that you can install, so you can get away without installing Xcode on your Windows computer to be able to try Swift on your computer. But for the purpose of learning, as I said, you can just stick with the playgrounds online and just do away with installing anything on your computer. And just a final reminder, always remember to stop frequently with programming with this class, especially if you're like me, you love programming and problems and logic and get lost in it easily. Just remember to take pauses, meditate for a minute or two, close your eyes, and just remember, just become present to your breath and to the nature everywhere surrounding around you, and then go back to your job at that level of presence.